Hi everyone and welcome back to Activity 23. Today we are going to talk about the half-angle identities. So half-angle identities, similar to kind of our sum and difference when we first were doing those, we are going to focus on some x values that we know from the unit circle and use those to help us find the half-angles today. So the sine formula, is 1 minus cosine of an angle we know from the unit circle divided by 2. The cosine formula is plus or minus 1 plus cosine of x divided by 2. The tangent, officially, we have a couple, right? We have basically the sine divided by the cosine, but essentially what that simplifies to be is 1 plus cos, or 1 minus cos over 1 plus cos. Or there's a couple other variations that may be of use. Officially could do sine of x and then 1 plus cosine of x, or 1 minus cosine of x over sine of x. So kind of different variations on when you might use either. Now, the plus or minus sign out front depends on which quadrant our angle lies in. So for instance, 15 degrees, that's in quadrant 1. We know that the sign is positive there. 22.5, that's in quadrant 1. We know the tangent is positive there. 165 is in quadrant 2, and we know cosine is negative in quadrant 2, so we'd want to be careful of that. Questions like 4, 105, yes, it is in quadrant 2, but sine is positive in quadrant 2. Tangent is in 15, that's quadrant 1, it's positive there. And then 75 degrees, that's also in quadrant 1, it is positive there. So again, we see those to be careful of, depending on what quadrant your angle is in, if it's positive or negative, going back to what we've been talking about for a few units. Now, actually using these formulas, okay, what do we see here? Well, if we want the sine of 15 degrees, again, we're going to use the positive piece of this, and then it's 1 minus cosine of x divided by 2. Well, what's the x, right? Well, we want to think about what divided by 2 is 15 degrees. Well, 30 divided by 2 is 15. 30 is a value from our unit circle that we know the cosine of. So we would say that 1 minus the cosine of 30, which is square root of 3 over 2, all divided by 2. And so what we can do to kind of simplify this ever so slightly is we can multiply everything by a 2 to kind of get rid of that fraction inside of our fraction. And we're just left with 2 minus root 3 all over 4. And then sometimes what you will see is this simplified just one step further, that you can break this apart, the square root on the top versus the square root on the bottom. And you would see 2 minus root 3 on the top, also under that square root. Square root of 4 is 2. Okay, so sometimes you might see it represented like it was with the square root of 4 underneath. Sometimes they will simplify one step further to just have that 2. For the tangent, okay, we have to be careful. There's a couple different ways we could do this. If we use that first formula, okay, we are looking for the 1 minus the cosine of x over 1 plus the cosine of x. And again, this is positive since it's quadrant 1. What divided by 2 is 22.5. Well, if we double that, 45 divided by 2 is 22.5. Again, 45 is a value from the unit circle that we know. So we can use that cosine value of square root of 2 over 2. And then 1 plus square root of 2 over 2. And then similar to the previous example, to kind of get rid of that division by 2, everything can get multiplied by a 2, and we end up with 2 minus root 2 over 2 plus root 2. So sometimes you will see this as your simplified answer, and that's, again, as simplified as it's going to get, and you would just be done. Sometimes you will see, however, the use of one of these other two formulas, and I would recommend the 1 minus cos over sine, since we have one singular thing on the denominator. And what you could do for that one is you would have 1 minus the cosine of 45, which again is root 2 over 2, all divided by the sine of 45, which is root 2 over 2. Again, everything can get multiplied by a 2 so that we can kind of get rid of the fraction within a fraction. We have 2 minus root 2 over root 2. And then last but not least, we usually don't like to have that square root on the denominator, so everything could get multiplied by a root 2, and we end up with 2 root 2, and then square root of 2 times square root of 2 is 2, all over 2, and finally the 2's can cancel, simplify here, 2 divided by 2 is 1 root 2, and then negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1. So either one of these may be a possibility of how you simplify your answer. All right, our last example here on this first page is cosine of 165. Again, with cosine of 165, remember, it's going to be negative since 165 is in quadrant 2, and cosine is negative in quadrant 2, and we want 1 plus cosine of x divided by 2. Now, 165, if we double that, is 330 divided by 2. So when we're plugging in, we're using 330 from the unit circle, and its cosine, which is square root of 3 over 2. And then, again, all you will see then that can do to really simplify here is multiply everything by a 2, so that we end up with 2 plus root 3 over 4, which sometimes, again, you will see it simplified beyond, like sometimes you'll see this as the answer. Sometimes you will see, like we did over here, where they simplify and you have that square root 4 just become a 2, not under the square root anymore. So be aware, multiple choice situation, you might see either example. All right, try the sine of 105 on your own. All right, and then number 5, let's look at another tangent question. Okay, so again, we've seen a couple with the tangent. Again, you kind of have two options. You could either have 1 minus your cos over 1 plus the cos, and again, 15 divided by 2 is 30. So we would plug in 30 for our x value. And again, from the unit circle, the cosine of 30 degrees is square root of 3 over 2. Oops, it should be a minus sign. And again, we want positive out front here because 15 is in quadrant 1 and tangent's positive. Multiply everything by a 2, and we get square root of 2 minus root 3 over 2 plus root 3. Now again, sometimes you will see this as the stopping point, right, if that's one of your answer options. Sometimes, though, they want you to simplify so that it's not all this fractional things. And again, what I recommend using is this formula up here where you have 1 minus cos over sine, right? Because if we do 1 minus cosine of 30 over sine of 30, we would have 1 minus root 3 over 2, and then all divided by the sine, which is just 1/2. If everything gets doubled to get rid of this fraction within a fraction, we have 2 minus root 3, and then 1/2 of 2 is 1, and we see 2 minus root 3 as our simplified answer. Now on the next page, you see at the top some pieces that are involving radians. Okay, a reminder with these radian measures, they will work the same exact way. However, you can just convert them to degrees if that makes more sense to you. So for instance, I can take 3 pi over 8 and multiply by 180 over pi. Pi's cancel, and really this is the same thing as taking the tangent of 67.5. Okay, so that might make more sense to be able to say, okay, well, 67.5 is 135 divided by 2, and then we can plug that in to our pieces. Again, you have two options, okay? You can either be taking 1 minus cosine of 135 all over 1 plus cosine of 135, and simplify that. Or we can take 1 minus the cosine of 135 all over the sine of 135, and simplify from there. Now, reminder, this should be a plus sign out front because 67.5 is in quadrant 1, and our cosine is positive there. If we convert these, we end up with cosine of 15 degrees. Again, this is quadrant 1, so we would have a plus sign out front. 9 pi over 8 is the same as saying 202.5. So reminder, sine at 202, that's quadrant 3, you would have a negative out front because it's a quadrant 3 value and sine is negative there. We will definitely be working more with these in class. Thanks everyone for watching.